Section 17 of A Cruising Voyage Around the World. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cruising Voyage Around the World by Woodes Rogers. Peru described. I shall not trouble the reader with the history of its conquest by the Spaniards, nor the fabulous stories of its Incas or princes. The curious may find them in the Spanish writers, and for the natives they are much the same as those I have described in other parts. Peru, properly so called, is about 1,000 leagues long, but the breadth varies from 100 to 300 leagues. The best known part of it lies on the South Sea and is divided into the three audiences: Quito in the north, Lima in the middle, and La Plata in the south. The air of Quito is temperate enough, though under the line. The soil is fruitful, abounds with cattle and corn, and they have mines of gold, silver, quicksilver, and copper. They have also emeralds and medical drugs. The audience of Lima is most noted because of its capital of the same name, being the residence of the Viceroy of Peru. This country abounds with mines of gold, silver, quicksilver, vermilion, and salt. The audience of La Plata I have already described in my account of that river. I shall only add that though the silver mines of Potosi be much decayed, yet some say the King of Spain has annually about 2 millions of crowns per annum for his wealth, and that those of La Plata and Porco in the same province, which were, upon discovery of the mines of Potosi, less used, may probably be opened again to advantage. Now goods are sold so cheap by the continual supplies from France that the Indians, who were employed in the manufactures, must again work at the mines, their own coarse goods being brought thither cheaper than they can make them. The Spanish writers in general say that for 500 leagues in length, from Tumbes to Chile, it never thunders, lightens nor rains, which agrees with the informations that I had from our prisoners, viz. That from Cape Blanco in south latitude 4 to Coquimbo latitude 30 it never rains, but the water of this is supplied by great dews, so that they have as good corn and fruit, particularly wheat, about Truxillo, as any in Europe. In the valleys near the sea the climate is hot, but tempered with breezes from the ocean and mountains. In the hilly part, far into the country, 'tis winter and very rainy, when 'tis summer in the plains, though in the same latitude. The product, beasts and birds, being much the same with other parts of the South Sea coast, I shall not insist upon them. They have their cordage, cotton, clothes, pitch, and tar from Chile and Riolito in Mexico, and though the country abounds with provision, 'tis always dear near the mines, because there husbandry is neglected. The cordage they use is made of coarse silk grass, which is very tough, draws small when strained, but grows twice as big when slaked. Captain Stradling told me he travelled the great road from Quito towards Cusco in his way to Lima, which has piles of stone on each side for some hundreds of miles. When he and his men were brought prisoners to Lima, the Spaniards put them in close dungeon, used them barbarously, and threatened to send them to the mines, because he attempted his escape and sailed in canoe from Lima towards Panama, near 400 leagues, intending to cross the isthmus and to get to Jamaica by some of our trading sloops, but was taken and brought back to Lima. Before he came hence, he saw several of the Spaniards who had been our prisoners, and said that all owned we had treated them very civilly, which has in part taken off the bad impression they had conceived of the English in those parts. For, not being used to war, they account all alike that come to cruise, because of the unheard of cruelties and debaucheries which were committed about 24 years ago by the buccaneers in those parts, which their priests did improve to give them an ill idea of all those they think fit to call heretics, not considering that most of those disorders were committed by French buccaneers of their own religion. Having said so much of Peru in several parts of my journal, I need not enlarge upon it here. The Spaniards extend it from Panama to Coquimbo, which is about 800 leagues, but the breadth varies. The gold mines are most of them in the north parts, betwixt Panama and Equinox. Before the French traded hither round Cape Horn, there was a considerable commerce from Panama to all the ports of the South Sea, as I noted before. But now they have supplied the country so much with European goods, and so cheap, that this trade is in manner sunk, so that from henceforward there will be little sent overland from Panama to the North Sea, but the king's revenue. The Spaniards have a great many ships and small vessels belonging to the several ports of Peru, which are chiefly employed in carrying timber, salt fish, wine, brandy, oil, and other commodities, from one part of the coast to another, without which they could not well subsist. For this country is laid to be more populous and better inhabited than Mexico. They make woolen cloths, here of several sorts. I have seen some made at Quito worth about 8 soles per yard, that's sold here for $5. The Indians do likewise make a coarse sort of cotton cloth, but since the French furnish them better and cheaper, those manufactures will come to nothing, and the people must betake themselves to digging of mines or what other employment they can get. The Spanish settlements in this country, as well as in Mexico and Chile, are not so full of Indians as formerly, for many of them are gone to remote parts and live in colonies by themselves, to avoid the slavery and taxes imposed on them by the Spaniards. For they were obliged to pay from $8 to $18 per annum per head to the king, which, had it been duly collected and faithfully paid, would have amounted to the greatest poll tax in the world. But 'tis now lessened by the removal of so many natives as above mentioned, and the impoverishment of the rest, who are sensible enough of their oppression, but are so dispirited that they can do nothing to assert their liberty, and they are besides kept under by the artifices of the priests. The Spaniards here are very profuse in their clothing and equipage, and affect to wear the most costly things that can be purchased, so that those who trade hither with such commodities as they want may be sure to have the greatest share of their wealth. Chile described. I come next to the kingdom of Chile, which lies nearest to those who shall think fit to attempt a trade from England into the South Sea. Father Ovalle, a native of this country, and procurator for it at Rome, agrees with our maps that it lies farther south of any part of America, on that called the South or Pacific Sea. He bounds it with Peru on the north, the Straits of Magellan on the south, Paraguay, Tucuman, and Patagonia on the east, and the South Sea on the west. He begins it at south latitude 25 and extends it to latitude 59, which is near 500 leagues. The breadth of it varies. In the broadest place from east to west he makes about 150 leagues, though Chile, properly so called, is not above 20 or 30 leagues broad from the chain of mountains named Cordillera to the South Sea. But when the King of Spain divided America into particular governments, he added to Chile the vast plains of Cuyo, which are of an equal length and twice as broad as Chile itself. The country in general Ovalle places in the third, fourth, and fifth climates. The longest day in the third is 13 hours, and in the fifth above 14. The first European who took possession of it was Don Diego d'Almagro, a Spaniard, in 1535. He is said to march hither from Peru by order of the King of Spain, with a body of Spanish troops and 15,000 Indians and blacks, commanded by some Indian princes who had submitted to the Spaniards. I shall not trouble the reader with the particular history of the Spanish conquests till they reduce this country, which they may find at large in Ovalle, Herrera, and others, but shall only say in general that it was not totally in subjection to the Spaniards till the year 1640, when the inhabitants submitted to the crown of Spain on condition that they should not be given in property as slaves. The Spaniards, who sufficiently experienced the valor of these people, treat them with more civility than they do the rest of the Americans, on purpose to keep them in obedience, and for the most part they have submitted to the Church of Rome. The Sansons say that Chile, in the language of the country, signifies cold, which is so excessive in the mountains called Sierra Nevada, a part of the Cordillera, that it freezes men and cattle to death and keeps their corpses from putrefaction, so that Almagro lost a great many of his men and horses as he passed those mountains. But the valleys toward the sea are very healthful, the climate temperate, and the soil excellent and fruitful, though with some difference according as it lies nearer or further from the equator, but the coasts are subject to strong gales of wind. The country is divided into 3 quarters, and those 3 into 13 jurisdictions. The quarter of Chile proper extends from the river Copiapo to that of Maule, and is hotter than Spain. The second quarter, called Imperial, reaches from the river Maule to that of Gallegos, and much resembles the climate of Spain. The proximity of the mountains on one side and of the sea on the other makes it colder than otherwise it would be, but it has warmth enough to make it one of the best countries in America. The valley of Copiapo is so fruitful that it frequently yields 300 for one single measure. Those of Guiaquil and Coquimbo fall very little short of it, and that of Chile proper is so excellent that it gives name to the whole country by way of eminence. I come now to give a brief view of what Ovalle, a native, says to it in general. He tells us that in Chile, properly so called, viz. The country betwixt the mountains and the sea, the soil and climate exceed those of any part of Europe in goodness, by the confession of the Europeans themselves. He says it's like the best part of Europe in everything, except the opposition of the seasons, it being spring and summer in the one, when it's autumn and winter in the other. But in the valleys the heat and cold are not so excessive as in Europe, especially from latitude 36 or thereabouts to latitude 45, so that neither the heat of the day nor the cold of the night can be complained of, from whence it's that the inhabitants make no difference between the summer and winter in their bedding and clothes. He adds that they are not troubled here with lightning and seldom hear thunder, except at a great distance. They have no storms of hail in the spring, and seldom above 2 or 3 rainy days together in the winter, after which the sky is serene without the least cloud. The north winds bring the clouds and rain, and the south winds speedily make all clear. They have no poisonous or ravenous creatures, except a small sort of lions, which sometimes prey on their flocks, but always fly from man. Nor are these lions numerous, there being only a few of them in the woods and deserts. He observes as a peculiar property of the air of Chile that no bugs will live in it, though they swarm in Cuyo on the other side of the mountains. From the whole, he infers that there is no country in America so agreeable to European constitutions as Chile, and air and provisions are so like their own, but rather better. The spring begins about the middle of our August, and lasts till the middle of November. Then the summer halts to the middle of February, the autumn continues to the middle of May, and the winter from thence to the middle of August. During this season the trees are deprived of their leaves, and the ground is covered with white frosts, which are dissolved about 2 hours after the sun rises. The snow falls seldom in the valleys, but in great quantity in the mountains, from whence it's melted in the summer, and fructifies the valleys and plains with rivulets. In the spring the fields are adorned with beautiful flowers of all colors and sorts, and of an admirable scent, from whence there distil a fine liquid called angel's water, which makes a noble perfume. The choicest flowers and plants that we cultivate grow wild there. They have groves of mustard trees higher than a man on horseback, and the birds build their nests in them. They have many physical plants and herbs, with which their Indian physicians perform wonderful cures, when the patients are despaired of by our European doctors, but they are very shy of communicating those secrets. Fruits and seeds brought hither from Europe thrive very well, but those of Mexico and Peru don't. They have all our sorts of fruit in such abundance that every one may take what they please, so that none is sold except a sort of extraordinary large strawberries which they cultivate. They have oats, wheat, and maize in such plenty that they are seldom troubled with want of grain. Their pastures are so rich, and their cattle of all sorts so numerous, that they don't value the flesh, but salt the tongues and lines, and send them to Peru with the hides and tallow, which is a great branch of their trade. They have store of noble and generous wines, both white and red. Their vines are larger, and their clusters of grapes much bigger than any in Europe. They have also plenty of olives, groves of cacao trees of several leagues long, almond trees, and such store of silk grass, which they use instead of hemp, that they furnish all the coasts of the South Sea with cordage for their ships. They have also great quantities of anise and cumin seed, salt, flax, wool, leather, timber, pitch, amber, and so on, so that according to Ovalle, merchants may trade from hence to other parts in the South Sea, and especially to Lima, from 100 to 300% profit, of which I have also been informed by our prisoners. Though they have abundance of mulberry trees, they breed no silkworms, so that the ladies who are extravagant in their apparel impoverish the country by purchasing the rich silks, though they might easily have enough of their own. They have plenty of bees, yet have their wax from Europe, for want of industry to improve their own, and they have pepper and other spice from the East Indies, though they have a kind of spice of their own, which might very well supply them. He adds that the herbage, fishing, hunting, wood for fuel and timber, and salt mines are here in common, so that every one may take what they please. They make little use of their mines of lead and quicksilver, for Peru has enough of the latter to purify their silver. Ovalle says the gold mines are so many that from the confines of Peru to the Straits of Magellan there is no part of the country without them, but they are not so much followed as in Peru, and they don't so much apply themselves to the silver mines, because those of gold are wrought with less charge. Their silver is dug from hard rocks, ground to powder in their mills, and then refined with quicksilver, which is laborious as well as expensive, whereas they have no other trouble with the gold than to wash the earth from it. Yet sometimes they follow the veins of gold through rocks, when they have hopes that they will grow larger, as they frequently do, and one of these veins is often enough to enrich the discoverers. Gold is not dug here in such plenty since the war betwixt the Spaniards and Araucanos, but the natives wait for the winter rains, which wash it down from the mountains into rivers, ponds, etc. When the women go into the water, feel out the grains with their toes, and make up as much as supplies their present necessaries, as our author says, but to me this appears a very odd way to get gold. He tells us that he sent one of those grains to Seville, where being touched it was found to be 23 carats fine, without any manner of purification. Most of the bells and great guns used in Peru are made of the copper of this country. He comes next to give an account of the chain of mountains named Cordillera, from his own observation, and what he has read in authors. He says they run from north to south, from the province of Quito to the Straits of Magellan, which is above 1,000 leagues, and accounts them the highest mountains in the world. They are generally 40 leagues broad, and intermixed with abundance of habitable valleys. These mountains form two ridges. The lowermost is covered with woods and groves, but the higher barren, because of the excessive cold and snow on them. The most remarkable animals in these mountains are: 1. That species of hogs which have their navels on their backs, called peccary. These go in great herds, with each their leader, until he be killed. 'Tis not safe for hunters to attack them, but when he falls, they immediately disperse. 2. Wild goats, whose hair is as soft as silk, and much used for fine hats. 3. Their sheep, called guanacos, shaped like camels, but of a far less size, with wool as fine that's preferred to silk for softness and color. He adds that the ancient Incas or princes cut two roads through those mountains, and if we may believe Herrera, one of them was paved for 900 leagues from Cusco to Chile. 'Twas 25 foot broad, and at every 4 leagues there was a noble structure, and at each half league couriers to relieve one another, and carrying messages from the state. He says there are still a sort of inns on this road, where travelers find all necessaries, but the path into the mountains are so narrow that a single mule can scarce pass them. The ascent begins at the very shore of the sea, but that which is properly called the mountains requires 3 or 4 days' journey to the top of them, where the air is so very piercing and cold that he found difficulty to breathe when he passed them, so that he and his fellow travelers were obliged to breathe quicker and stronger than ordinary, and to apply their handkerchiefs to their mouth to break the extreme coldness of the air. Herrera says that those who pass them from Peru are troubled with aching and vomitings. Ovalle adds that there are meteors upon those mountains, sometimes so high in the air that they resemble stars, and at other times so low that they frighten the mules and buzz about their ears and feet. He says on the top of those mountains they can't see the country below for clouds, though the sky over their heads is clear and bright, and the sun shines with admirable beauty. When he passed the highest part of that which is properly called the Cordillera, he found no snow, though in the beginning of winter, whereas in the lower parts 'twas so deep that the mules would scarce travel. He supposes in reason why there was no snow on the top is, that it reached above the middle region of the air. There are 16 volcanoes in this chain of mountains, which sometimes break out with dreadful effects, cleave the rocks, and issue great quantities of fire, with a noise resembling thunder. I refer to our author for the particular names and places of those volcanoes. He doubts not but there are many rich mines among those mountains, though the natives industriously conceal them and make it death to discover them, which has defeated several attempts of that nature by the Spaniards. The natives have no occasion for those mines themselves, because they have plenty of provisions, which is all they desire, and they are afraid that such discoveries will occasion the Spaniards to dispossess them, or to make them work in the mines as slaves. He concludes this head with an account that very rich mines were discovered at the foot of those mountains on the side of Cuyo. Those mountains of the Cordillera are passable only in summer or in the beginning of the winter. There are frightful precipices and deep rivers at the sides of the narrow passes, which frequently occasions the loss of mules and travelers. The streams run with such violence and so far below the roads that to look at them turns one's head. The ascent and descents are so steep that they are difficult to pass on foot, but the irksomeness of the way is alleviated by the beautiful cascades which the water naturally forms as it falls from the rocks and mountains. And in some of the valleys the water springs up to a great height, like fountains made by art, amongst other refuse plants and flowers, which make an agreeable prospect. All these streams and springs are so very cool that a man can't drink above 2 or 3 sips at once, nor hold his hand in them above a minute. In some places there are hot springs good against many distempers, and leave a green tincture in the channels through which they run. One of those rivers, called Mendoca, has a natural bridge of rock over it, from the fault of which there hang several pieces of stone resembling salt, which congeal like icicles as the water drops from the rock, and are formed into several shapes and colors. This bridge is broad enough for 3 or 4 carts to pass abreast. There is another bridge near this, called the Incas, laid over by art betwixt 2 rocks, as some say, but our author thinks it's the work of nature. It's so very high from the river that he could not hear the stream, which runs with great rapidity, and though it be a large river, it appeared like a brook when he looked down from the bridge, which he could not do without being struck with horror. He comes next to describe the particular rivers which run from these mountains, but I shall only mention the chief of them, and though most of them don't run above 30 leagues, yet some of them, towards the mouth, are navigable by ships of the greatest burden. The first is that which rises in the confines of Peru, about south latitude 25. 'Tis called the River of Salt, because 'tis so salt that it can't be drank, and petrifies what's thrown into it. 2. Copiapo, which rises in latitude 26, runs 20 leagues from east to west, and forms a bay and harbor at its entrance into the sea. 3. Guiaquil rises in latitude 28, and forms likewise a bay and harbor. 4. The river of Cocumbo, which rises in latitude 30, forms a noble bay and a port, with beautiful myrtles and other trees on the bank, that make a noble and pleasant grove. 5. Aconcagua, a large deep river that rises about latitude 33, runs through several fruitful valleys. 6. Maipo rises about latitude 33 and half. It's so rapid that it admits no bridge but one made of cables. It enters the sea with so much force that its waters form a circle, and are distinguished a great way. It's brackish, noted for excellent trouts, and the sheep which feed on its banks afford mutton of a curious relish. There are several other rivers which fall into it. The first is that of Santiago, alias Mapocho. 'Tis divided into several streams to water the district of Santiago, which sometimes it overflows. Not far from the city it sinks underground, and rises again in a grove, about 2 or 3 leagues distant. 2. The river Pongwu. Its water is extraordinarily clear and sweet, and flowing into veins of metal very much helps digestion. It runs for several leagues underground, fructifies the valley which lies over it, and produces excellent corn and melons. The banks of this river are adorned with beautiful trees. 3. The rivers Ticolina and Lampa, which unite together within 10 or 12 leagues of their rise, and form the noted lake of Cudagues. It's so deep that great vessels may sail in it, is about 2 leagues long, and its banks covered with trees that are verdant all the year. It abounds with excellent trouts and smelts, which are great convenience to the city of Santiago. 7. Rapel is nothing inferior to Maypo, enters the sea about latitude 34.5, and receives several other rapid streams. The adjacent country has excellent pastures for fattening of cattle. 8. Delora rises in latitude 34.75 and is exactly like the former. 9. Mole, a great river, which rises in latitude 35 and bounds the jurisdiction of Santiago. The natives call all the country betwixt those rivers Promocus, i.e. a place of dancing and delight, which our author says is very just, for he never saw a more pleasant country, nor one better furnished with provisions of all sorts. The Spaniards have many noble farms in these parts. Near the mouth of this river there is a dock for building of ships, and a ferry belonging to the king for the convenience of passengers. 10. Itata. 'Tis 3 times as large and deep as the Mole, and enters the sea about latitude 36. In most places they pass it on rafts, and in some it's fordable. 11. Andaline, a river which runs slow and enters the spacious and pleasant Bay of Conception at latitude 36.75. There is another small river which runs through the middle of the city of Conception, a little above which it falls from a high rock and gives the inhabitants an opportunity to form all sorts of waterworks from it, among pleasant groves of laurels, myrtles, and other odoriferous plants. 12. Biobio, a famous river, which enters the sea in latitude 37, 'tis the largest in Chile, and is from 2 to 3 miles broad at its mouth. Our author says its waters run through veins of gold and fields of sarsaparilla, which make them very wholesome, and good against several distempers. This river is the boundary betwixt the Indians who are friends to the Spaniards and those who are their enemies, and make frequent incursions upon them. This obliges the Spaniards to keep many garrisons in those parts, but the natives trust to their mountains. This river swells so much in the winter that it becomes unpassable and occasions a cessation of arms on both sides. These people, says Ovalle, have given the Spaniards more trouble than all the other natives of America, so that they are forced to maintain 12 forts, well provided with men and cannon, besides the city of Conception and Chilam, to overawe the natives. 13. Imperial, a pleasant river which falls into the sea, about latitude 39, after having received many other rivers, and among them 2 which run into the famous lake of Buran. where the Indians have an impregnable fortress. 14. Talton, about 30 miles from the river Imperial, is deep enough for great ships, where it enters the sea. 15. About 8 leagues farther, the river Guiaquil enters the sea, and is capable of small barks. 16. Valdivia, so called from Pedro de Valdivia, one of the conquerors and governors of Chile, who built a port and city near the mouth of it, where great ships may come up about 3 leagues from the sea. This river opens to the north, and over against the city lies the pleasant island of Constantine, with 2 others. The river is navigable on both sides of the island, but deepest on the south side. 17. Chilo, which rises from a lake at the foot of the Cordillera, where there are baths good against the leprosy and other distempers. Our author says so little of the rivers on the east side of the Cordillera that we pass them over. Ovalle gives an account of many remarkable fountains, both hot and cold, good against most distempers, but I shall not insist on them. He says they have many sea lakes or bays, which bring great profit to the owners, because their fisheries are more certain than those of the sea, and furnish most part of the Lenten fare to the inhabitants, and in the hot season abundance of salt. He adds that in the valley of Lampa, near Santiago, there is an herb about a foot high, resembling sweet basil. In summer it's covered with grains of salt, like pearl, which is more savory, and has a fine flavor than any other salt. Our author comes next to treat of the fertility of the coast, which he says, among other fish, produces shellfish in great quantities, larger than anywhere else, and 1. Oysters, valuable both for their meat and pearls. 2. Chorus, a fine sort of shellfish, which also bred pearl. 3. Manicus, which have 2 round shells, the inside of which resembles mother of pearl. In short, he says, the sea throws up shellfish in such quantities upon some parts of the coast that ships may be loaded with them, and their shells are of such variety of colors and shapes that our European visitors might from hence have a curious collection, whereas the Indians only burn them for chalk. There are other sorts of fish on these coasts, some of which they call sea stars, others suns and moons, because they resemble those planets as they are usually painted, which are common elsewhere, but not so large as here. These fish, reduced into powder and drank in wine, are an infallible remedy against drunkenness, and frequently used for that end, because it creates an abhorrence of wine in those who drink it, says our author. He adds that great quantities of amber are found on this coast, particularly the grey sort, which is the best. They have all other sorts of fish, common to us in Europe, besides others peculiar to themselves. He comes next to their birds, and besides those which are common in Europe, there are 1. Flamingos, bigger than turkeys, the feathers of a white and scarlet color, of which the natives make ornaments, and their legs are so long that they walk through lakes and ponds. 2. The child bird, so called because they look like a swaddled child, and with its arms at liberty. They are very good meat. 3. Airones, so much valued for the feathers, to make tufts, that formerly, they say, every feather upon their heads cost 2 reals. These birds are rare. There are other called garcolos, whose feathers are generally used by soldiers. 4. Voicas, from whose notes the Indians pretend to foretell death, sickness, or other misfortunes. The feathers on their breasts are of a deep scarlet color, and the rest brown. 5. Pingudas, their body is of the size of an almond, their feet upon flowers, and shine like polished gold, mixed with green. The males have a lively orange color, like fire on their heads, and the tails of those birds are a foot long and 2 inches broad. 6. Condores, which are white as ermine, their skins are extreme soft and warm, and therefore used as gloves. They have abundance of ostriches and variety of hawks in this country. Ovalle comes next to treat their beasts. He says they had no cows, horses, sheep, hogs, house cats, nor common dogs of any sort, goats, asses, or rabbits, till they were brought hither by the Spaniards. But now all these are increased to a wonderful degree by the richness of their country and pasture, so that one cow frequently yields 150 pounds weight of tallow. Herrera says that when the Spaniards came first hither, a horse was commonly sold for 1,000 crowns, but now they are so plenty that they send them yearly to Peru. The most remarkable animals, which are not common with us, are 1. Their sheep, mentioned before, shaped like camels, though not so large. The natives used them for ploughing and carriage, before they had European cattle. Their upper lips are slit, with which they spit at those who vex them, and wherever their spittle falls, it causes a scab. They governed them by a kind of bridle put into their ears, and they would kneel like camels to take on their burden. 2. Wild goats, which very much resemble those sheep, but are all of a red clear color, so very swift that they outrun horses and are never to be tamed. They feed in great herds and are hunted by dogs, which easily catch the young ones that are excellent meat. The flesh of the old ones, dried and smoked, is reckoned the best of its kind. These creatures, especially the oldest, have bizarre stones in a bag under their belly. Our author says he brought one of those stones to Italy, which weighed 32 ounces and was as perfect an oval as if it had been formed by a turner. He gave the Indian who found it 70 pieces of 8 for it. Their most remarkable trees, besides what are common to Europe, are 1. The cinnamon tree, so called because the bark resembles cinnamon in such plenty that they cover their houses with them. They keep their leaves all the year and resemble the Italian laurel royal. 2. The guac tree grows in the Cordillera, is as hard and heavy as iron. The decoction is good against many diseases. 3. The sandal tree, that's very odoriferous, a preservative against infectious distempers, and therefore used by the priests when they visit the sick. 4. The maguya, whose leaves are admirable against burnings. The fruit is like myrtle berries and of an excellent relish. 5. The quilo, of whose fruit they make a very sweet drink. 7. Ilugan. The Spaniards call it molde. 'Tis of the shape and color of pepper. It grows on a small tree and makes an agreeable liquor, coveted by those of quality. 8. The myrtilla, which grows on the mountains from latitude 37 and upwards. Herrera says its fruit is a common good to the natives, not unlike a grape, and of these they make a wine that exceeds all other liquors. 'Tis of a bright gold color, will bear more water than any other wine, cheers the heart, and never offends the stomach, but increases appetite. The vinegar made of it exceeds all other sorts. Our author adds that their cypress, cedar, and oak trees are extraordinarily good. He comes next to the islands of Chile. The first are those of Juan Fernandez, already described. The second are the islands of Chiloe, which lie about latitude 43 and form an archipelago of 40 islands. He says the nature of the climate is such that it rains almost all year, so that only maize or such other grain can ripen here as need little sun. The chief diet of the inhabitants is the root papas, which is larger here than anywhere else. They have excellent shellfish, very good poultry and hogs, some beeves and sheep. The capital of this country is the city of Castra, which lies in the chief island and is garrisoned by the Spaniards. Here they have great store of honey and wax, and some gold mines on the coast. Their chief manufacture is clothing for the Indians, and they have vast woods of cedar trees of a prodigious size, with the planks of which they drive a great trade to Chile and Peru. 3. The islands of Chinos in latitude 45, but of little use, because of the excessive rains which drown the soil. 4. The Fine Island, which lies almost in the same latitude with Valparaiso and St. Hugo. It has a safe harbor for ships, where they may ride in 20 or 30 fathom water. The Spaniards say it is a very beautiful island, abounds with trees, wild boars and other game, and excellent water, and there is plenty of fish on the coast. 5. The island of Mocha, where the Dutch under Spulberg found a very generous reception by the natives, who furnished them with plenty of sheep and other provisions in exchange for clothes, axes, etc. The north side of it is plain and low, but the south side rocky. 6. The island of Saint Maria, 13 leagues southwest from the city of Conception and 3 from Arauco. It's very fruitful and temperate, lies about latitude 37 and is well inhabited. 7. The islands of Pedro de Sarmiento, so called because he discovered them when in pursuit of Sir Francis Drake. They are about 80 in number and lie about latitude 50, so that we suppose them to be those now called the Duke of York's Islands, which lie a little to the northward of the Straits of Magellan. Our author comes next to Cuyo, the third quarter of Chile, which lies on the other side of the Cordillera towards the east. It is divided into several provinces and quite differs in temperature from Chile. The summer is excessive hot, and the inhabitants, so annoyed with bugs and mosquitoes, that they lie abroad in their gardens and yards. They have almost perpetual thunders and lightnings, and are mightily infested with poisonous insects. These are the bad qualities of the country, to compensate which the soil in many places, if possible, exceeds that of Chile in fruitfulness. The crops are richer, the fruits larger, and of a better taste, because of the greater heats. They have store of corn, wine, flesh, and all the fruits, roots, and herbs of Europe, with large plantations of olives and almonds. The cold is not so sharp in winter as that of Chile, and the air much clearer, so that the season is then very temperate. They have great quantities of large excellent trouts and other river fish. Their peculiar fruits are: 1. Algorabo, of which they make a bread so sweet that strangers can't eat it. They supply Tucuman and Paraguay with figs, pomegranates, apples, dry peaches and grapes, and excellent wine and oil. Ovalle says that in his time there were rich mines of gold and silver discovered here, which were reckoned to be better than those of Potosi, and that, in short, it had all necessaries for life in as great abundance as any other country, and in general is very healthful. The provinces of Tucuman and Paraguay, which bound this country, we have already described. End of section 17.